I've been battling with StreamYard. Newcastle are forever battling with PSR. Are there some lessons, though, we can learn from our friends at Chelsea? Let's find out right here on Toon Tactics TV, folks.
Brilliant from Shea. And now Murphy could take on the shot. Bobby and Shea
All right, all right, all right. Good evening, folks. Good evening, folks. And as maybe some of you guys have experienced, there has been a massive, like, I don't know, StreamYard outage at the moment. I think it's global because from what I can see from other content creators and football content creators across the globe, they're all getting all sorts of kind of problems accessing StreamYard, being able to deliver shows on StreamYard. Even I was battling away. I wasn't even sure if we're going to have a show today, but by the grace of God, we are here today. I hope you guys can still access the YouTube or whatnot. And even if you can't, you can always play this back. I am super excited about tonight's show because as we are obviously discussing in the midst of a transfer market, summertime market, and we've got tons of players that we're always talking about, but we're also always forever battling and talking about PSR and what can Newcastle do to increase their revenue, and how comes these other teams are able to spend X amount of money and we can't, and we have to sell players and all these other things. And as we need to, what can we do to battle all these things? And really tonight, we've got obviously our special guest, Bobby Fairview, who really is one of our own kind of channel members on Toon Tactics TV, back by popular demand. You guys would have seen live from watching the show when we were initially talking about Chelsea's season review, and we got to talking about the financial aspect of Chelsea. And all of you guys on the show and the chat were super engaged, learning about how Chelsea essentially operate from a financial standpoint. And as a result of that, the birth of this show has come on. So without further ado, we're going to be talking all things, essentially PSR and revenues and loopholes and all these other things, learning about how it all works and what can we do, learning from our from the likes of Chelsea. So without further ado, allow me to welcome Bobby Fairview on the show. Bobby, how you doing, sir?
Big up, Philip. I'm well, sir. Very well, thank you. Big up to the chat as well. Please like and subscribe. We don't say it often enough when we're on.
Yes. Like and subscribe, folks.
I don't think you said it once.
And you know what? I should be saying, because you guys respond super well to the hitting the like button, the notification button. Even the show on Tuesday, as a result of it, got super amount of views and folks commenting and all of that. So yes, as Bobby said, like and share and subscribe. And we've got a few people coming in. I hope it's not too much trouble on the StreamYard. Let me guys know. I know that there's been issues with the StreamYard, but we see folks already coming through on the chat as well. So good to see folks. Adrian Pickett, God bless you, sir. Always good to see you. Good evening. Looking forward to this. So am I, Bobby. So Bobby's here, but so am I, Adrian. So am I, Adrian. Hope you're well. So Bobby, we've been working on this. I'm ready to. You know me. I'm a visual learner, so I'm gonna.
Love your slides. You love your slides.
I'm gonna bring out the old slides and we'll kick things off, talking all things PSR. So, all right, and let me get onto the screen.
By the way, I love the graphics. Love the graphics there again.
I thought for a moment it put you on edge a little bit, but I wanted to give it the feel of, we're getting that, we're getting the inside information, the inside scoop, in this battle against PSR. We're breaking into the Premier League's offices and trying to get the inside scoop type of thing.
That you are, and I mean, I think when this idea was born in the middle of the stream, I think,
Yes.
for those who weren't around, because we found ourselves as we talked about transfers, all leads back to the ability to finance the transfers and still comply with PSR. And I think a number of fans look on at Chelsea and see them spending all this money. They hear about profits, then they hear about losses. It's very confusing. And they just wonder why Chelsea can do things that others can't.
Exactly. Well, and speaking of profits and losses and doing things that other people can't do, let me know, first of all, if you can see this on the screen.
I absolutely can.
You can't?
No, I can. Yes, I can.
Excellent. So this is the most Premier League. This is from The Athletic. And this is the most Premier League clubs should be safe from PSR trouble this month, as it is here. So green obviously being the safest. And this is for the 24-25 season breach. And Chelsea, Bobby, are right back at the top with 300 million within PSR, meaning that you guys can spend 300 million and you're still well within it. Whereas Newcastle are somewhere mid-table below Nottingham Forest, very interestingly. And when we were initially kind of putting the show together, Bobby, I'll put this across to you. I mean, first of all, what's your take on all of this? And by the way, good evening to you. God bless you, Wilbur. Good to see you. Yes, you are. Right bang on time, sir. Right back on time. Bobby, let me know, what was your thoughts on this?
I put myself in the shoes of a Newcastle fan, okay? Being owned by the wealthiest owner in football, in sport.
Yes.
You can't spend a penny, and then you just watch Chelsea blow $1.5 billion, and then you get this slide, and you're like, what? How does this even make any kind of sense, right?
Right.
So the average person, the rules are so complicated, but then they're so simplistic in a way as well. And what's happening here, Philip, is I don't know what your background is, but just to share with the audience, I'm a chartered accountant by trade. So
right.
I did studies both in the British system, if you like, and in the US system. And if you look at the accounting rules for the US versus most other jurisdictions, they're very prescriptive. There's a rule for everything. It's a rules-based society. Everything is codified in a law. Whereas in the British system, Canadian system, if you like, Caribbean system, it's more principles-based, right? You try to get the intent of whatever the rule is, and everybody complies with the intent, the spirit of it. So although there have been American owners in the EPL before, you've got for the first time a private equity firm owning a football club and controlling a football club outright. Completely different perspective. You have got to have a rule and a safeguard against these guys in every respect. So we'll pause there because that'll lead into a deeper discussion, right? But I would like to hear from you. When you see it, what do you think?
It was interesting because, first of all, my first initial thoughts when I saw it on X, I was like, yeah, we're not in the orange. I'm not, I don't have the same financial background as yourself, for instance, but, kind of doing my own armchair accounting, but also listening to the experts like yourself, I'm like, we're not in the orange. And there are folks that I follow on X who are a lot more deeply knowledgeable about, PSR, where Newcastle stand. And you can see them kind of when they're going through the weeds of it, how the Athletic put it together, for instance, not really getting the wages of players right for Newcastle in particular, and hence why putting us in the orange. And me just as a Newcastle fan, knowing that we haven't spent any money for the last 3 transfer windows, that's 18 months, on a first team player, and actually selling players, selling our, some of our young assets in Elliot Anderson, who's doing it big at Nottingham Forest, Minte, who's doing really well at Brighton. Ironically, we're looking for a midfielder and a right winger who we had to sell. And I'm like, yeah, we're definitely not in the orange. We're doing well.
And when you look at Chelsea and when you see Chelsea up there, what do you think?
Well, the initial thoughts about Chelsea was, I wonder how much of that is to do with you guys selling your women's team for £200 million.
So that was immediately apparent to you then?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
And you spent a lot of time analyzing the market and profitability, etc., as it plays to Newcastle. And now you would have seen the discussion around Chelsea's results, right? So you knew that there was something, what I refer to as window dressing with those numbers.
Because I haven't got expertise as you have, for instance, my first, it wasn't as like, I don't have the same conviction, like in terms of like, so I'm like, yeah, but how much of that is I'm like, how much that's selling the women's football team in the hotels? Do you know what I mean? But so,
right.
Do you know what I mean? So, I couldn't concrete that. So, I go on shows, on rival TV shows, on Football Terrace, for instance, and they were like, yeah, look how great Chelsea are doing. And I'm like, yeah, but because I'm not a financial expert, I'm like, yeah, but how much is that the hotels and the stadium? So that's why it's really good to hear from someone like yourself, really.
Yep, we'll get into it. So you are absolutely correct. The headlines have been out there. What I refer to as window dressing are the asset sales to themselves.
Right.
We need to explain what it means. And I'll say, Philip, I mean, you just referred to me as an expert, and I should have said this before. I think we want to pitch this at the level that a doctor who's never done a finance course,
yes, please,
can understand, or
yes,
a carpenter, or a teacher, or anyone, right? So because everybody's a fan and everybody's curious about this, as you had said, as we were having the conversation in the last stream, people were really engaged around the topic, and they're curious. How is Chelsea spending this much money in such a short space of time, and then being at the top of the ladder in terms of PSR compliance?
Yes.
Completely confusing. Let us confuse them even more and go to the next slide.
All right.
Okay.
Let's do this. Yes, here we go.
Unless you have a question there. Have you got another question?
I was only going to ask.
Yeah.
But if you can't answer it, it's all right. Is there anything else that strikes you about that graph where you think, so for instance, I'm looking down at Aston Villa right at the bottom, but if you don't have that kind of same knowledge on Aston Villa, it's okay, because I didn't. Like, does it make sense to you? Or obviously maybe Chelsea stands out because you know Chelsea.
Yeah, Aston Villa makes. Oh, well, sorry. So maybe your question is getting at. Let's do a quick lesson in what really hurts the PSR results, right?
Right.
The biggest driver for Aston Villa is that their wages as a percentage of their revenue is the highest in the league. I think it's something like 94% or something like this.
Yeah.
So they really invested heavily and eroded all of their operating margins on high wages. High wages are for good quality players. Good quality players get you deep into the Champions League. Simple formula, right? So that's why they're where they are. They bet heavily, and now they need to extract themselves from that. And they were probably planning to sell a player to cure that situation. So some homegrown talent who didn't cost them anything would be pure profit, as they call it. Pure profit is a term that's being used now. It simply means, well, let's do a quick lesson in amortization, which is another topic that so when you purchase a player, let's say for £100 million, and you put him on a 7-year contract, the contract is recorded as an asset for £100 million on day one on the balance sheet of the club. But over time, you utilize the asset or amortize the asset. That's what amortization is. It is a method for you to account for how much of an asset you use over time. So you spread out the cost of the acquisition, the 100 million, over 7 years, because the player is with you for 7 years. So ordinarily it'd be 100 million divided by 7. But then Chelsea started to play around with the amortization rules, and the EPL said, no. You can only amortize it over 5 years. So in other words, what that means is that when the club prepares its financial statements for the year, it will take into its income statement a charge or an expense of $20 million for the cost, the acquisition cost of that player, for them playing for the club for that year. So you're trying to match your expenses with the revenues that the player is generating, right? But is limited to 5 years. So as 100 million divided by 5, it means you take a charge into income every year of 20 million, and that is a bad guy for your PSR calculation because it's an expense.
Right.
So then that player also has wages. That's another expense. So it's the cost of the player and the salary, the original cost of the player, basically distributed over 5 years, so 20 million a year, plus their wages. That becomes a hit to your income statement, your income. It reduces your net income. And that's what puts you into the red.
That's what put you, And I don't know how much you think this is the case also, because whenever I do this stuff on AI, like when I talk about amortization, it basically says amortization isn't real in the sense of, like, when you buy the £100 million player, you the club, the buying club, set up a payment structure with that club. That's real. That's what you pay with that club. But how you put it on your accounts, like you said, you spread the cost over a 7-year period. That's you kind of spreading the cost of the value of that asset. That's like you as but what's that's what's on the paper. So £100 million player on paper over 7 years is £20 million or what, £25 million or whatever it is. But what you actually do, like in real life, the actual payments you make between you and that and the selling club is almost done separately. I don't know if that's accurate for what I'm saying, or if that makes sense, but that's what
is completely accurate.
Right.
So let me try to say it as an accountant would say. So let's paint a scenario where that the selling club demands payment at the date of the transfer of the registration of the player. So immediately the buying club has to produce £100 million, and they pay it. That has nothing to do with then how you record the cost of that player. Right? You want to spread the cost over the life of the contract. Ordinarily, that's what accounting rules would tell you to do. But PSR has limited it to 5 years after the abuse by my club.
Right.
So you're trying to spread the cost, but it's a paper entry. The money has already gone to the selling club. To your point. So it's the economic. The economic is the actual cash moving.
Yes.
The accounting entry is more of, hey, we want to make the accounts look like we're matching the revenues with the expenses as they're earned.
Exactly.
Right? So PSR in some instances have modified the accounting rules. And to your point, this is a paper transaction. So Aston Villa decided to invest heavily in success, and they might need to sell someone, or they can sell their women's team. Which should be a clever way to do that.
They haven't done that, and we're going to get into it. I'm almost skipping ahead because they haven't done that, but we're going to get into it. We've got a few folks in the chat. Wobujog, the graphs make sense to me. A big portion of Chelsea's green bar is the sale of the women's team. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We're good. Speaking of the women's team and the hotels, by the way. And I'm so not frustrating isn't the word, Bobby, because and maybe as a content creator, maybe we're guilty of this. I'm like, how does everyone forget this? Because even the Athletic were like, this is the Athletic, right? Like, why isn't? Oh, look how they're like, look how great Chelsea. I don't know if they've mentioned, to be honest, but they're kind of like, oh, look how healthy Chelsea are doing. I'm like, they sold their women's team. Like, why doesn't it, like, isn't that?
Why isn't it bothering anybody?
Why if Newcastle sold like PIF owned hotels in Dubai?
Yeah. well, to be fair, Chelsea originally had already owned these assets.
Right.
So Newcastle is something you don't own, but we'll get into how Newcastle can do some interesting things. I think there's some opportunities for you guys to do some Clearlake style structuring.
Yeah, let's do that. Reluctant Gamer, yo, God bless you, sir, and yo, back to you. Welcome to the show. Good to see you. Wobajog, but we don't mention the other side of that, which is the revenue the women's team generates will no longer be included. Okay, stripping the clubs of revenue generating assets will bite them back long term. But we don't mention the other side of that, which is the revenue the women's team generates will no longer be included. I get that because you've sold it. Stripping the clubs of revenue generating assets that will bite them in the long term. So there is it seems like a short-term solution is what I'm getting from it, Bobby, from that comment.
Well, there is more to consider because it's not really you've not really removed the revenue per se. And when we get into some of the slides later on, we'll be able to explain exactly why that's not really accurate. It's another series of paper transactions similar to the one we just described there for amortization. So
we've just looked at a bit of window dressing. Let's look behind the window dressing. Chelsea's this is what you sent to me in response, Bobby. Chelsea's operating loss has now exceeded 200 million in each of the last 3 seasons. What does this mean, Bobby? What are we looking at here?
So you just saw a slide that showed Chelsea, the most compliant club in the league.
Yes.
From a PSR perspective.
Yes.
Now we need to and this is where it gets confusing for people, right? You have that PSR profitability slide that you were showing before, which shows net income of the club on a PSR basis, right? Then you've got the accounting basis, or IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, right, which has a different amortization schedule. And that's what you call GAAP income or accounting income. And now there's this concept of operating income. So operating income is where you strip out items like what you were referring to just now, Philip, as an accounting transaction that's not quote unquote real. It's just a paper accrual, right? So you strip those out of your income statement and say, well, what is my business really generating? What's the income that I can see as real cash, core earnings of the business? Not these window dressing transactions and all of these other items, right? Which kind of co-division. You're a business to collect gate receipts, advertising revenue, pay wages, stage games, et cetera, what is the real true economic result of that? That's what operating income is. And so as you can see, as reckless as they say Roman Abramovich was, he was actually quite judicious in the way he was managing the club. So he was running a small loss for a number of years after PSR came into effect. And it really begs the question, why does somebody buy a football club? Okay. And people would accuse Newcastle of having their reasons for being owned by the PIF. You had Roman with people, the PIF potentially copying him. But Roman said up front, look, I have better things to do with my money. I'm just a fan. Now, is that really true? Because at the end of the day, he bought the club for less than 200 million. And a lot of these things can be verified on AI with a quick search. I think it was 140 million. The large chunk of it was paying off debts. He then pumped in 1.2 billion of covering. You see these operating losses here? So it's literally cash being bled out of the club right through from 2014, 15, coming up to when he left, right? So what he would have been doing every year is, you know, he had a credit line with him, which he was funding, and he was simply covering those losses every year. In comes Clearlake, who was supposed to be putting us on a sustainable path and who has the best PSR results in the league. And you can see them coming in 2020, 21, 22. Now you see the losses are increasing because of COVID. And Roman actually, I mean, he did some incredible things. You know, he opened up the hotels to medical workers, for example, during COVID. And was housing medical workers. The amount of things he did for the community, it was incredible.
Yeah.
And so there were the COVID losses, which most of the clubs had. But no, there's no longer an issue with COVID. So you can see clearly coming in 21, 22, bleeding cash, hemorrhaging cash significantly. And that's despite claiming to be on a low wage structure. All right. Now, a large amount of these losses, you know, Champions League revenue when you win it is around 100 million pounds. So that's part of the problem. Not being in Europe, not having a front of shirt sponsor is another issue. But we also have a massive squad, which we will actually show folks in a minute. But although we've reduced the average wage per player, the squad is about 90 players and counting at this point in time. And people might not believe me.
Yeah. No, that makes, and I know I'm with you because even the chat, there's so many really in-depth questions, and for the folks, I know there's a few other folks asking different questions in like that might not necessarily relate to the show. I've starred those questions and we'll answer, you know, around transfers and Trafford and all these other things. We'll get onto that later on in the show. We're going to be focusing on, you know, PSR, Chelsea, Newcastle, and what we can do. And then, you know, all the other questions we'll answer towards the end of the show. But we've got some really in-depth questions already for you, Bobby. Here, Sarah Robson, I don't know if it's your first time to the show, but you're really welcome. Good to see you, and God bless you, sir. And for all the folks that are coming in, please do like, share, and subscribe. You do massive stuff for the channel, and I'm really, like I said, the questions seem really in depth and thought out already. Sarah Robson says, on his question, with Chelsea exploiting the PSR loopholes, what is stopping PIF selling 20%, for example, of their investments to themselves? This may be a stupid question. My initial reaction is that there's no stupid question, but Bobby, I don't know if you want to answer it now or if you want to.
Let's do that. This is we can do it as we go.
Yeah.
And I want to reemphasize there are no stupid questions. Once you have the question, we need to put it in the chat and we need to address it. Because I think the education around how clubs are operating is important for the fan base. We pay the gate receipts, we pay for the merchandise. These clubs are ours. They don't exist without us, so we should understand what's going on.
Absolutely.
Now, to answer the question, there's nothing stopping Newcastle from doing that. Look, I think, I mean, I'm a recent member of the Toon Tactics community, but I will say that I made the observation coming in that I found Newcastle fans to be quite timid. They feel as though they're going to be quickly accused. They've been, you know, had some bad experiences maybe when the club was being bought, you know, a lot of accusations, etc. So it seems as though you don't want to move too aggressively, or certainly not as much as Chelsea has been doing, the Blue co-owners. But there's not what I would suggest is it's probably still only going to be yourselves and city that'll be owned by Gulf states. And so if you do something novel and the EPL is supposed to approve it, it is highly likely the rest will gang upon you and make it, and not permit it. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So when Chelsea sold the women's teams to itself, it was subject to approval by the EPL. But guess what? They couldn't get the vote to prevent them from doing it. They might find the vote to do it for Newcastle. So
Yes.
this is where, if I were Newcastle, I would not necessarily want to be a first mover.
Yeah.
But there've been so many first moves made already that there's lots of room, okay, for you, president, for you to point to say, hey, sorry, what's good for the goose needs to be good for the gander. I'm not doing anything novel here, right? So for me, this is where I would like to focus my observations in terms of suggestions as to what can be done. Things that have already been done, not being a first mover.
Excellent. And Sarah Robson, let us know if you've got any follow-up questions to that. That was a really, really good question. Excellent question. Got interesting couple. Enzo's got two questions. I'll put them together, or a statement and a question. Enzo, Chelsea are the best-selling team in the Premier League. People tend to forget that, and he follows this up with Bobby. They have made 200 million each season for the last 3 seasons, and they can make 250 million alone on sales this summer. Now, there isn't really a question, but I feel like it's a statement saying we're making money through ourselves. This is, and Enzo, forgive me if I'm kind of taking it out of context, but we're making money. We've got revenue. It's not just, the women's team and hotel selling. We're actually making money from selling players. Like maybe then the big green bar that we see for Chelsea's PSR the situation is justified, maybe. What's your kind of initial thoughts, Bobby, on that, on the sales of players and how much money you're making?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Chelsea has had a history of being a very good selling club. I would not want to be too simplistic about it, though. I would want to look at it and separate it between the Marina regime and the sales that have taken place here on the Clearlake. I think, though, they're still not good enough because, as you can tell, the operating losses are still over 200 million. Okay, so although we're a selling club, we actually have to do a lot more selling.
Right.
And just to go through the history of the selling on the Clearlake, they had a lot of, when they did the fire sale of the Champions League winning team, for some reason the Saudis all of a sudden just bought a lot of players, and they haven't bought a lot since, particularly at those prices, right? So it really was a little bit of a suspicious market activity that Chelsea has not been able to replicate since. If you would also recognize that during January there were a lot of Chelsea players for sale. Guess how many we sold? None. Okay, the mini window has just closed. There were Club World Cup teams buying players.
Yes.
We have 90 of them. They are all for sale. Okay.
Yes.
So why aren't we selling any to any of those teams? Look, it's premature. I think people like Enzo here, he's got a lot of confidence after the Saudis saved Boehly a couple of years ago. Needs to happen again. We will see very shortly how good they are at selling. But asking 60 million for Nkuku, it's not going to happen.
And Enzo, do follow up. I hope that answers your questions, but do feel free to follow up. And guys, no question is a stupid question at all. Like, we're all learning here. Ian, big up TFT. Absolutely. Big up Terrian and the Football Terrace community. Absolutely incredible channel, all that they're doing. All right, so next slide, and that leads us all to that's been a really good warm-up session right there, Bobby. That leads us to the agenda itself. So we will be talking about what is private equity and its role in football, who bought Chelsea, how did they finance the squad rebuild, how do they use their corporate structure to beat PSR compliance? What lessons can be learned by Newcastle? And walk through a creative PSR window dressing transaction for Newcastle to kind of give ourselves a kind of a scenario there as well. I don't know if you want to add anything on this slide, Bobby, or if you want me to go on to the
Yeah,
next one.
yeah. No, look, I think this is a. I think the first bullet is a good one to start at right now. Actually, just give folks a bit of a context just to set the scene here. Club ownership traditionally has been by wealthy individuals. Somebody in the community who's a fan buys the club, puts the money in, absorbs the losses because football clubs are loss-making institutions, right? And the only ones that make strong profits are the ones who are able to flip players. So Brighton, the Tottenhams, these teams who have been good at buying young players. Tottenham to less extent, but Brighton is certainly great on it. So what has been happening more recently is that a lot of those wealthy owners, to fund the expansion of the clubs, have been borrowing money from private equity firms. What is private equity? People sometimes talk about Clearlake being a hedge fund. It is not. So a hedge fund is usually an institution that does trading using risk-based strategies, highly liquid risk-based strategies, right? So they're simply in the stock market, using all kinds of fancy mathematical techniques to try to make small amounts of money. Well, some instances they'll be taking big bets as well, right? But those are traders, right? So that should become, when you think about a mutual fund, that can be compared with a mutual fund. Again, that's where, a structure that holds shares, investments in a basket of different companies in different industries. A private equity fund is different. So you're not holding the stock of public entities. You're not trading derivatives and other fancy instruments. What you're doing is, as a private equity investor, you're actually going and owning businesses, buying businesses, turning them around, and then looking to sell them in at most a 10-year time frame.
Yeah.
What has been happening since the banking crisis in 2008? Now, in 2008, remember the mortgage crisis in the UK and the US, etc. Banks there were capital rules placed on banks that made it a lot more difficult for them to lend. So governments wanted to teach banks a lesson for causing the banking crisis in 2008 and put regulations in place to restrict their lending. So these private equity guys who've been making a lot of money owning and buying businesses, turning them around and selling them, said, you know what? Well, let us do some lending as well, because banks can't lend anymore. Instead of buying a company, we'll just lend to them. So a number of football clubs have actually been borrowing from private equity firms. Crystal Palace, for example, who's been in the press recently for their European qualification because of their ownership structure. They have actually been taking money from a firm called Ares that we will get into shortly, a private equity firm, and they have been lending Crystal Palace money at 20% interest rates. That's worse or as bad as a terrible credit card. Okay, so if you consider that, there are a number of clubs taking this expensive money, banks aren't lending. So private equity has been dabbling in the EPL in this way in recent years through loans.
Right.
When Chelsea was put up for sale, Todd Boehly didn't have the money, and we'll get into this. He didn't have all of the money to
Yeah.
make the purchase. So he went to a private equity firm. He didn't borrow the money from them. He became a co-owner of the manager of the private equity fund. So Egbali and a chap named Feliciano, they started a private equity firm to take money from wealthy people and institutions.
Yeah.
And what they specialized in is buying and selling bad loans.
Okay.
So that is Egbali's expertise. So loans that have been in default, they go buy them, try to cut. So they're almost like loan sharks. They go, buy loans and shake down the customers and collect the money, right?
Wow.
Right. So very aggressive, and they have the biggest portfolio of bad credit, of distressed loans, when compared to other private equity firms. So this is what they are known for. Okay. So Todd Boehly, desperate to get Chelsea, went to them and said, "Hey, I only have 300 million. Two friends are going to give me some money. All right. And we want to borrow some money from you. We want you to join us and help us buy Chelsea, and you be co-owner." So in other words, Todd Boehly and Egbali, the two of them basically have to sign off on any decision. So I'll pause there. That's the context of private equity. For the first time, you've got a club being bought by an owner who doesn't have enough money, so he gives control of the management of the club to two guys who simply take money from other people and invest it in businesses. They have not put a penny of their own money into the club themselves.
I have so many questions. But the chat is also. I'm gonna go to the chat first. I'm gonna pause my own questions for a while. But this isn't. It's making a lot of sense here. Warbo Jog asks or states really, losing the women's team revenue means it won't count in Chelsea's PSR, even if sold to the parent company. To me, the owners are shifting Chelsea's assets to themselves, making Chelsea poorer in assets. Now, yeah.
Yep.
Now go on, Bob, because to me, I know what Woodjog's making sense, but to me, as a fan, I don't fully comprehend that.
Sure. So by transferring the women's team to another group company, selling it to themselves, and this is going to become clearer to what we're jogging in a minute when we put up the corporate structure. We will see what selling it to themselves really means. I think from they're not really he's absolutely correct. The revenue does not count in Chelsea's PSR calculation. But here's the challenge. The women's team is a loss-making business unit within Chelsea. Massive losses. So there's actually a strain on the business. So moving them out actually helps our PSR.
Right.
Right. But I think the asset shifting, we'll see that in a minute when we put up the corporate structure.
Massive sense there. Cy Robson, it is reported that Newcastle may have 200 million to spend. Is that just for the window or over the 3-year PSR window? I'll give it a go on this one. From the little that I know, there's never, from my experience, Cy Robson, and kind of listening to kind of the likes of Kieran Maguire, Wilson, even just trying to do it as my own thing, there's never like a set budget. Like the media always tries to say, this one's got 100 million to spend, that one has 200 million to spend. Even me trying to guess this summer how much Newcastle are going to spend is always dependent on sales. So there is like there is a cutoff point like that Newcastle can spend before they breach PSR. But that can be overcome if they sell players. Like we talked about it on, was it Tuesday I had a show? Like we were talking about what if Newcastle were to spend 180 million on the 5 players. It was Tuesday. We talked about 5 players that could possibly cost us 180 million. and kind of using AI, using Newcastle's bank statements, using Swiss Ramble, and those kind of things. Kind of for Newcastle to be able to spend 180 million and to be within like a 10 million, still have like a 10 million headroom. So the 105 million, which is the threshold loss. If Newcastle were within 10 million, that Newcastle, in order to spend 180 million, would have to sell roughly between 60 to 70 million pound of players. So for me to understand, to cut a long story short, is it's dependent on sales. There's never like a set budget like this is 200 million and this is what we're going to spend. It really is dependent on sales. Bobby, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, or kind of even say, "Oh, I know it's a little bit different." I don't know.
No. I mean, I think I'll make some comments on it later, but I think that's adequate. Yeah, let me park my comments until we get to the Newcastle section.
It's all building. Like
Yeah.
Cy Robson, because we overspent a few years ago, hence the Anderson and Minte deals. Yeah, we're going to get to it. But great question. In fact, let me make sure I park it here. I'll make sure I star your comment, Cy Robson, so you know we're getting back to it. Sam makes sense. I think you said that when you was explaining the Chelsea financial model. Wobojog, wow, I didn't know that about the women's team. Great show, guys. Fantastic already. Sophie B, good to see you. Hey, Philip, and God bless you, Sophie. Cy Robson, I get you. Great. I think that's what we want to get from a lot, is for people to get that. Bobby, are you ready to move on to the next slide, or did you want to add anything else on this part?
No, we can move on, and I think this will be a good time then to find out where the 1.5 billion has gone, just to set the scene here. Right. So guys, you were going to say something. You go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because I always love to see, because I've obviously I follow you on X now, and I've got you. I always love to see your comments on literally on every. For instance, like the Ekatike transfer, and
Right.
you from the moment Chelsea were linked to saying we're not getting him, and
Can't afford it.
me obviously, because obviously I've gone my own football show, gone on a football show, like listening to people saying, yeah, if Chelsea get Ekatike and and in my mind all I've got is, but Bobby said you're not going to get him because of the financial. Like it's, I never mentioned it, but I'm like, I don't know if Chelsea are going to get it, but it's these type of things. And having this type of knowledge, I'm thinking maybe I want to see if Chelsea actually, are Chelsea just like almost doing like a media PR thing. But yeah, these are the 90 players, possibly 91 players. Now they got Delap. I don't know if Delap's in there. I didn't check, but yeah, take it away. But let us know what is this? 90 players from Chelsea.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, right? How many more players do they expect us to have, right? So when you look at this list, granted, a lot of the development squad is in here, okay, but it was important, and some good fan went out and actually just chronicled all of the names. You can see that some of them are still not even on there. So like Delap, he's not yet on the list.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple that have coming recently. They're not on the list. But this is where the money has gone. Okay, because let's be clear, a number of players came in the first summer when Todd Boehly was playing sporting director, and they have and those were the ones that were then sold to Saudi teams.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And of course, the original Champions League winning squad, that was sold. And this is how the money was the proceeds from those sales have been reinvested in these 90 odd players. All right. And you would see Chelsea content creators on YouTube pretending that we need to get this to 100. I mean, at some point in time, it just doesn't make sense. Okay. And they say to sporting directors, at the end of the day, this is the crux of the model. It is the second youngest squad in Europe. The first youngest squad is the sister team in France. Okay. And I'm sure they would be delighted to get to 90 kids over there as well. All right. But what we are looking at here is a powder keg of future sales backed by data. This is the investment.
Okay, so here's my question on this one. And they had this debate, and this is maybe perhaps gets to part of the crux of the argument for Chelsea. When you've got one set of Chelsea fans, what I'm kind of receiving, essentially saying we are buying youth. Where Chelsea are trying to win big titles and big major titles, they're investing in youth who, in a couple years, in their peak, will make this like essentially this invincible team who will go on to win majors. There's the other group of Chelsea fans that are saying that essentially this is like a Ponzi scheme and they're just trying to buy and sell players. Maybe it's too simplistic, Bobby, but like, what's you're talking about these 90 players. What's your kind of overriding feeling on this? Are Chelsea here to win major trophies, or are the owners here to win major trophies, or why are they buying these 90 players essentially?
It is well documented that our owners have an admiration for Tony Bloom and Brighton. They have seen Brighton buy young players, flip them for profit, and generate positive operating cash flows.
Yeah.
So they like that mid-market model. Tottenham has been trying to do it. They invested in a stadium, so they had slightly different priorities. But the idea is to build value, because remember, the definition of a private equity firm is that you buy and you have a certain date of exit. That magic date is actually 2033.
Yes.
Okay. And the reason why we know that is because of the next slide. So if you can just move to the corporate structure on the next slide.
Let's do it.
Right. So this, folks, there's a gentleman by the name of Greg P. Cordell. So his Twitter @ is in the corner of this diagram there on the left. I don't know if people can see it. But Greg produces, so it's Gregory P. Cordell is his X @ He publishes a lot of useful information about the various clubs. So he maintains this diagram whenever there's a corporate action, a sale of an asset in between various subsidiaries. He just keeps this updated. All right. If we can just zoom into the two top boxes there, Philip.
Two top
we're
boxes.
gonna move from the top and come down. So you see Blues Investments. So just scroll, it's top of the page. Yeah. So just go up somewhere. Yeah. So just zoom in there. Yeah. Scroll up again, just so that folks can see this text. Okay.
A little bit more.
No, that's perfect. I think people can see. So that's perfect. So as I mentioned before, Boehly Group consists of 3 billionaires who use their own money, 300 million pounds each, as the initial equity investment to bid on Chelsea Football Club when the UK government had sanctioned Roman Abramovich. 900 million was not sufficient to buy the club. As I mentioned before, Roman had bought it for 140 million. He had put in 1.2 billion covering operating losses for the 19 years that he owned it. And he was looking for a price of 2.5 billion for the club. All right. So he effectively made a profit. It's not a great rate of return over 19 years, but Roman made a profit. And that is a traditional way that a billionaire makes money from a football club, right? So as the league grows in popularity, all of the clubs become more valuable. Buyers, Tottenham, for example, right now is for sale for $4.6 billion. Okay, that includes the stadium. And then the next layer of growth is when they have a Netflix-style delivery system for the EPL as content globally. where individual subscribers all around the world could simply go and just subscribe to the exclusive EPL content. That's where they want to get to. My understanding is the NFL uses that model. I don't watch the NFL, so I'm not familiar with what's happening there. But that's the ultimate goal, right? And all clubs are going to become more valuable. So they sold that story to Clearlake. And Clearlake was co-founded, as I mentioned, by Boehly and Feliciano. They are a private equity fund, taking money from wealthy people, buying bad loans, recovering the bad loans, making very good profits. They're known for that. But they decided, yeah, we're interested actually in funding this venture. So we will come in as co-owners of this business with you. So they put up 1.6 billion for a 61.85% interest in the ultimate holding company called 22 Hole Co Limited, with the 3 billionaires owning 38.15%. So you see those percentages there. So far, so good in terms of how the money was raised and what they're investing in.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So there's three billionaires.
Yeah.
They've together though they've purchased 68% of Chelsea.
38.15. So that's the Boehly group on the right hand side top box.
38.5. The Boehly group.
Yeah.
And
correct.
then the 61% is owned by Clearlake.
Clearlake, right?
Okay.
So Clearlake would have gone to wealthy people. It's rumored that these are Saudi investors in there, by the way, but who knows? But there are a bunch of investors behind that Blues Investments midco that we don't know who they are, who funded that, gifting Boehly control of a football club. So Boehly is the first man in the UK who is controlling a football club and does not have any non-financial interest in the outcome. And the reason why I say that, I make a distinction between City and Newcastle in this way. You are owned by institutional investors as well, because you're owned by states. Yeah. The difference is it is not for profit motive only. Winning and pride, national asset are consistent with how fans generally feel about the sport.
Yeah.
Clearlake has one objective: return that $1.6 billion in 10 years at a double-digit return.
Right.
Irrespective. And the only way to do that is to flip players. Okay. And that is why you saw that page before of 90 players, all under the age of 24, 23. Some of them going to be a Haaland, we hope, right? And we're going to sell them and make £100 million per year until we get the Netflix content delivery system. So that is the business model. That's why these guys came together. 1.6 billion plus 900 billion. That gets you to the 2.5 billion of cash that went into a trust account for the benefit of the victims of the war. Roman didn't get the money. It's sitting in the bank account still.
And there's I'll part of my questions because there's a good couple of questions from the chat as well. Sophie B, most of them young players would, I think it's from the previous slide. Most of them young
big
players.
Big up Sophie B.
Big up Sophie B. Exactly. Most of them young players will leave for free or be sold for hardly anything, as they won't get any game time. We're sort of seeing that. Like, for instance, Renato Vega, you bought him in the summer, sold him in the winter. Or no, you loaned him out in the winter. Is he back? He's back now. It's weird.
He's back.
I don't get it. Like, it's, yeah, anyways. Warbodrog would be a lot cheaper buying out the Brighton data department, wouldn't you say?
You know, this is a really interesting question. Why not just buy Brighton? What I can tell you is, I don't know which one of the two, but one of the sporting directors is from Brighton. Yeah. Brighton just fired the last set of sporting directors. The only way to replicate Brighton is if you get Tony Bloom. I think Brighton is Tony Bloom.
It's Tony Bloom.
I think he just knows how to pick a coach. He knows how to pick a player. He's just got the gift.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And he's not going for any money. He's a proper fan. He's a proper Brighton fan.
Is he? Well,
Yeah,
look. I throw shade on the Brighton model because it's a commercial model, but that club is there punching above its weight. I respect it, but it is not for Chelsea.
no, it's not. It's not. It's not. And we've got 20 plus viewers in the chat. Great to have you guys on board. Shows that people are really, really engaged and enjoying the show. And whilst you are enjoying the show, just like me, who forgets to ask people, you might have forgot to like, share, and subscribe. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Don't do what I do, just forget to ask people to do that. Please do like, share, and subscribe, folks. It generates a lot more. It goes out obviously into the browsers. I don't know where it goes out to YouTube and shows a little bit more people about the show. So please do that, folks. Right, David Barter, my first time seeing you, sir, on the show. God bless you. Welcome to the show. 100 players, 40 players, 40 of them out on loan, paying half their wages. Another hotel for sale next PSR window. So he's got quite a. He's kind of seeing. He's got quite a downward projection for Chelsea there, Bobby.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are restrictions. Look, and this is where the flip for profit thing is not that offensive to me because, to be fair, Roman had the loan program. Look, structurally, we've got a small stadium. We're obviously in a really good part of the country in terms of people and value of real estate. But our revenue base cannot compete with the other clubs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our stadium, 42,000 I think is our capacity. It's in the low 40s anyway. So Chelsea always had to do a bit more creatively to generate income, and so we have a history of this. We've never been this aggressive in terms of the creativity, but so we always had to have players on loan, and once again, the footballing authorities came in and restricted the number of players that can be out on loan. I actually don't agree with that as a policy. I think that's a problem. And that is what is forcing clubs to sell their homegrown talent. Once upon a time, you could have sent that player out for loan after loan until they break through. Now, it's hard for a player to actually break through when that cycle happens. And I guess that's why some people don't like it. But if you're good enough, you would break through, right?
Yes.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
If you're good enough, you're going to make it. It would have been good if you all could have sent Mente out on loan just to instead of having to sell him, right, and generate some loan fees from him, and still keep your player. So I think that was a huge mistake. But look, there's a limit on right now, so this is why we have to do the flipping for profit thing, the Brighton model.
Makes sense. Sire Robson, when Chelsea sell them on, I think that's the players, they have a sell-on clause like they did on Tino when we signed him from Southampton. That's true. And this season, City have a sell-on clause with Trafford, 20%, I think. Yeah, I think that's partly why maybe the deal's taken a little bit of a while as well. One from Wobojog here. Oh, sorry, Sophie B did say hello back to yourself, Bobby, as well. Wobojog, aren't you worried of what they might do as a private equity if they start losing faith in the flipping strategy?
That's a really good question. And look, I think this is where it actually introduces a really important concept here. The difference between a wealthy owner who owns businesses, has other streams of income, and a fund is that a fund is money in a box. There's no commitment by anybody to put more money into that box. So once it's spent, the private equity manager, Boehly, has to go and convince new investors, or the same investors, but to convince new money to come into the box. And the first thing those investors are going to ask, well, why do you need money? Why didn't you capitalize sufficiently in the first place? Is there a problem? Right? So that's why I refer to it as money in a box, and it's difficult to get new money in. And this is the fundamental problem with having these investors owning sports clubs. In the US, billionaires are not permitted to own sports clubs. So I'm sorry.
Really?
Institutions are not permitted to own sports clubs.
Yeah.
Only in the UK. Individuals, so you have to be a billionaire individual because there's a feeling that if you care about the club, you care about the sport, you are going to put in that extra money to make sure it does well.
Yeah.
Institutional investors, are you making my double-digit return or not? If you aren't, can I get my money back or hand over the asset? Let me dispose of it because I need to recover my money to get back to making the double-digit returns every year. So money in the box. So you have to be worried that there isn't somebody with compassion, with love for the game, who, if there's a problem, will put in additional money, and that's the vulnerability.
So yeah, so that sounds like the laws or the policies in America that kind of sound like they're like help to filter out or try their best to filter out owners with the best intentions possible. I'm sure it's not always 100% guaranteed, but it seems to make sense in that way.
Well, it forces them to put their own money in. So, I mean, at a minimum, so you see, Eghbali is running Chelsea and not a penny of his own money is in there.
Yeah.
That's a problem. That's what the Americans are trying to avoid.
Makes sense.
Right?
There's a
arguably,
question.
Though, it's the same for Newcastle. Before we go on, arguably it's the same for Newcastle. It is just that I think that the people, the government and people of Saudi Arabia will not tolerate that. It's a bad reflection on them personally, so they'll be put in the money, right? So there's a kind of there's a slight difference there. Although you're institutional, there's still a non-profit motive that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable with a state-owned, a state owner.
Their pride is attached to Newcastle's success, really, isn't it? That's what it's coming across like. There's a question from. Sorry, go on, Bobby.
No, I said that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. There's a question from David Bart I'm going to get to in a moment because I think it leads us to the next slide. But just want to say, Sophie B wants to make it very clear, no to Madueke, and she's celebrating. And the Goat Father, good to see you, Goat Father, and God bless you, sir. All right, Philip and chat, just getting my daily fix of Newcastle before bed. Hey, and like I said, you could be anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here. Always a blessing to have you. And this isn't the first, but I'm going to go back to David's question because it's going to lead us to the slide. But David does say in his other one is, hey Philip, first time I stumbled on your channel. Subs, great content, bro. I really, really, really appreciate that, David. Like it's always humbling to hear that stuff because we do put a lot of energy in kind of hopefully making the show. Like even today, Bobby's put in a lot of material that's really, really incredible. So happy that you stumbled on it and happy that you're enjoying it. And that's also a reminder for me to ask you folks to like, share, and subscribe because we can get more folks like David in who have stumbled across the channel. And if we don't do like, shares, and subscribes, and that means the channel doesn't get out, then people like David and others don't get to hear about it. So folks, do like, share, and subscribe. One more message here from Aaron Kane. Evening Aaron, hope you're blessed. Back to David's question. I think it leads us to the next slide, Bobby. I hear what you're saying when rules are brought into, I hear what you are saying, but when rules are brought in to stop Newcastle, and then you see other teams, the Big Six, like that exists, it's frustrating to see you all bend the rules. That sort of, I think, leads us to the next slide on Newcastle's ownership structure, Bobby.
I want to make a couple of comments on the prior slide before we move on.
Yes.
I think there aren't Chelsea fans here, so I'm not going to dive too deep into the weeds. But a couple important things to note. Okay, that 22 whole call, if you scroll down to the bottom of the page there, just
Oh,
scroll down a little
I
bit.
went somewhere else
No, that's
totally.
right. Yeah.
Here we go.
Right. So, oh, sorry, maybe you want to zoom out just a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Zoom out some more. Right, that's good. So you see 22 Holdco at the top there, and you see Chelsea FC Holdings Limited, right? So Chelsea FC Holdings Limited, that is the entity that is subject to PSR regulation. Okay, that's a really important thing to know. 22 Holdco, the ultimate parent company. Do you see how many companies you have to go through before you get down to Chelsea Holdings to then find the football club, which is at the very, very bottom?
Yeah. Quite a
Right?
few.
That's 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of companies above Chelsea.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why that's important is that PSR regulation is on the football club and its immediate holding company. So the companies above it, the 3 above it, so you see that blue code 22 midco right under your cursor, the one that owns
Yes.
Chelsea, blue code 22 limited,
Yes.
2022 Holdco limited. None of those entities are subject to PSR regulation.
Yeah.
And so what Clearlake has done is that 2.5 billion we discussed earlier, that money was paid to Roman to get control of the club. They now needed to find money to now buy those 90 players that we saw on the previous slide. So the money that was raised from Clearlake, that didn't actually go to buy any players. So they now had to go and get money to buy that squad, and it's 90 players, and as is well documented, it's 1.5 billion that was spent on that squad, right? So that's where that red writing is. That red writing on this diagram, if you just zoom in on that, that provides the details of the $1.2 billion that was borrowed by Chelsea to buy those 90 players. So every single player on Chelsea's books is debt financed from external institutions. And debt has a cost. And interest on that debt ordinarily should be included as an expense in your PSR profitability calculation. But because it's in these holding companies so far up, it is excluded from the PSR results. So that is another clever way of keeping legitimate expenses of acquiring this squad out of your PSR compliance, window dressing, making the numbers look so good. I'll pause there. Philip, or your screen is doing some funny stuff.
Oh, is my screen gone again? Oh, okay. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Let me get myself back on track. There is just whilst I'm doing that, there was one question from Wobojog. You guys, I'm still not clear where the women's team and hotel are in that chart, and it's in the bottom right there.
Yeah, so that's the first thing to note. Like, is that clear there? And I'm going to address Wobojog's question now, because that's the next thing about this. So in terms of the vertical length of it, 4 layers, and that's how they use that. Philip, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, that's how they use this vertical elaborate structure to do things. 2 things. A, not record the interest in the PSR results on that 1.2 billion that was borrowed, right? And then the other important thing is that they're able to move money then between these holding companies by selling the assets to each other. So just going to Wobojog's question there, you'll see that the women's team came from under Chelsea FC Holdings and went to Blueco. They created a new holding company for the women's team, but it's still, so instead of it being under Chelsea FC Holdings, all they did was to move it under Blueco 22 Midco. So it's still part of the group. It's not been sold to a third party. They've just moved it from one holding company to the other and recorded a fictitious $200 million profit.
Wow.
But it's not that simple. Before you actually, I see you look dazed. And I encourage everybody else to do this. You know what they did? After they moved it over there, they sold a 20% stake to Serena Williams' husband. Was it 20%?
Yeah, I saw that.
Ohanian. I call it the Ohanian Rule. That when you do one of these fake transactions, you get a third party to come in and take a stake in it. Automatically, it validates the price of it. And the EPL cannot argue. Because that transaction with Ohanian was an arm's length third party transaction. So it immediately legitimizes the price, immediately legitimizes the profit. And Chelsea's women's team has never made a profit in its existence. Okay, right? It's not close to profitability, and it is in no way valued at 200 million. But that's how they do it. They just simply create all these holding companies, and they're just moving the assets underneath this wide umbrella. So we're tall, which allows us to keep funding costs, expenses out of the financial results. And then it allows us to move things between holding companies within the group at whatever price we decide, invite one of our friends to take a stake, validate the price, book the profit, and be the most beautiful PSR P&L in the EPL.
What does Serena Williams' husband gain from it, though?
To be able to sit, it's $20 million of great publicity. Okay, he's there shaking hands. I mean, he probably can spend that on breakfast, right? It's $20 million. The better question is, what does $20 million do for Chelsea after they've just spent $3.6 billion, right? Getting the, well, 3.7, I should say, which is the money board plus the money that they raised to buy it in the first place, right? The 2.5. Why do they need $20 million from Serena's husband? I mean, it's pocket change to him. Makes no difference to the cash position of Chelsea. It was there for one purpose, to validate the price of the women's team that was completely made up.
Crazy. Crazy.
Right? What is worse is that the rest of the EPL just shrugs and say, okay. But you know what that means? Everybody's now going to go and do the same thing because they all own women's teams. So why not? Knock yourselves out. And better yet, a transaction has just occurred, so you have a nice price to point to. So you'll all value on the basis of Chelsea's valuation.
There you have it. Got a few more questions here before we go to the next slide. Bobby, Goatfather, all this revenue laundering is wrong in every way possible, and the Premier League allowing it to happen is even worse. It's more of a statement there, but if you want to comment on it, Bobby, feel free to.
The only thing I will say is that we can't get a regulator in football fast enough. We need a regulator. Otherwise, people would just continue to abuse the rules.
Okay. I'm going to ask about regulator a little bit later to get your thoughts on it. David Barter, wow, that was explained so well. Still complete nonsense, but thanks for making me understand how that works. And I agree. Go for the criminals. David Barter, can we loan get Chelsea accountants for can we loan Chelsea accountants for a season? I'm almost worried if we do that with Sync Football, just with our owners' money and Chelsea's accountants, I would. It's like putting gas to oil. Or I don't know.
Well, we're going to walk through an example later on. So we're going to do a trip in Newcastle. Yeah.
Exactly. So exactly. Sophie B, that's actually super smart. Goat father, more than 14 clubs vote for this to continue, right? Yes. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. So speaking of Newcastle and going further, we'll move on to the Newcastle ownership structure here. I'll zoom out first and then
Well, let me ask you, Philip, what struck you when you saw Chelsea's versus Newcastle's?
it's less complicated.
Mhm.
Was the first thing. I did get Newcastle's ownership structure from before. We talked about it. Obviously, it's changed a little bit since Amanda Staveley and Medad Gadusi um, had left. So, Public Investment Fund took a larger percentage, and then so did obviously the Reuben brothers. Uh, I confess I don't know too much about like Omaha Holdings and these various like holding companies, but I know that they have some obviously some relation to either the Reuben brothers. The public investment side of things is a lot more clear
Mhm.
in terms of their ownership. I think they obviously, um, and that's because they've got money. I think in terms of how they kind of operate. The Reuben brothers obviously have taken on the holdings. They've got money themselves. It's a lot more clear and it's a little bit less complicated. Like the Chelsea one, if I go back to the Chelsea one, like just wide horizontal. There's like I don't know. There's like four different layers of hierarchy, and across that you've got like I can't even count how many limited and property holding companies you have. Whereas the
Right.
Newcastle one is you can see on the left, Public Investment Fund, on the right, the Reuben Brothers. There's some holding companies in between them, which makes sense to a degree. You can see that who owns how much percentage structure there. And a little bit further down, a couple more layers, Newcastle United itself. Um, then the women's team, the Newcastle Football Club. I don't know too much about the like Molten Pictures Limited and what that's about. Um, but yeah, that was like the first thing is just it's a lot less complicated than the Chelsea
Right.
one.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that struck me about it.
Right. So it's flatter and it's narrower. And look, I'm not going to pretend that I am an expert in takeover finance, and I hope I did not bastardize that term, but Muslim finance, Islamic compliant finance, I'm not familiar with this, and therefore I do not know what the PIF's views are on using debt. What
Yeah.
I did observe is that you do have debt facilities on your balance sheet. There is a long-term debt facility. It's not too big. I think it's less than 50. It's $50 million or less. Then you've got your operating overdraft account. It's more of a credit facility that gets repaid every year. So that usually just funds your ongoing operations. But generally, it is equity capital that has been used to finance Newcastle. So when I say equity, just for folks who are not finance gurus, just basic terminology, debt versus equity. When the owner puts their own money in, that's equity. When the club goes and gets a loan, obviously debt, right? So that's the distinction that we're making there. So Newcastle's team was funded. Newcastle's team and its small operating losses are being funded by equity contributions by its owner, its owners.
Right. Right.
Chelsea has been using those two credit facilities that we discussed there at the holding company level for 1.2 billion to fund both the team and to fund losses.
Mhm.
And as of June 2024, there was 90 million pounds left available of credit room. So picture yourself going to Vegas on a boys trip and you've only got $90 of credit room left on your credit card.
Yeah.
That is Chelsea going to the Champions League next year. Okay. That is Chelsea in the transfer window, and that's why I could have been posting with such conviction that I know that they're not going for all of these players, because there isn't much credit left. Every single player that comes through the door at Chelsea is being put on a credit card. And that credit card, the way the debt is structured, is that a portion of it only gets repaid when the club is sold. So that same private equity firm that's been lending money to Crystal Palace at 20% loaned $500 million to Blueco, the consortium, and that had £90 million left. The bank credit facilities were maxed out, and that was a year ago. So unless somebody's going to give Eghbali a higher purchase plan, I do not see any big names coming into Chelsea. That's the basis for my conviction.
So does that mean that if Chelsea want to progress or move forward, they have to make a big sell? I'm thinking
They
of
have
Cole
to sell.
Palmer when I say
They
this.
have to sell.
Like that.
Yeah, they'll have to sell. It's sell to buy from here. But the question is who. And a lot of Chelsea's players are, once they sell them, you can't make a loss on the sale. So that's another concept, right? Where the original sales price less the book value needs to be a profit in order for that player to not affect your PSR position negatively. But so that's the position that we're in. We're going to be sell to buy from here on. Just want to square away that point. Just getting back to the Newcastle structure on the comparison. What struck me is that it was flat, meaning you're not utilizing that holding company structure, but you also don't have interest that you don't want to include in your PSR calculation. So the fact that you're flat is not a terrible thing unless you're planning to use debt financing to do any investing in the club.
Right.
I think you're too narrow, and this is where asset sales would be important. So you probably want to add an additional holding company so that you can then have additional subsidiaries, sister
For
companies,
property and assets and stuff like
to cut your assets to. Exactly.
It kind of sounds like, going back to your Vegas analogy, like I'm the kid with the rich parents who provided me with all the money I need to go and do what I need to do. And I'm very square like that. And you're the kid that's in the, not you personally, but as Chelsea,
You're right.
that's on the continuous overdraft limit.
That's it.
Right. Okay.
But I'll tell you, in order to sell, in order to pay back all of this debt, because as I told you, the £500 million that they borrowed in 2023, the way that loan is structured, it's called a paid-in-kind loan. So you pay it out by taking out more debt from the lender. So the balance keeps building. You don't pay it back for 10 years. And by 2033, 2033, when it matures, it's going to be almost $2 billion that is owed to that company. So when you think about the fact that Chelsea has to be sold for more than $2 billion just to pay back that lender that gave them $500 million. And that has nothing to do with the $1.6 billion that was taken from Clearlake's investors, who also are not being paid back. And interest is compounding at a similar, if not higher rate. So my estimation is that Chelsea needs to be sold for £8 billion.
£8 billion. And
let me make sure I have the correct number. Anybody who goes on my X profile would see that it's pinned to my profile, and they can feel free to bookmark it and contact me in 2033 when it's sold for more or less. But my prediction is that Chelsea needs to be sold at £8.5 billion for Boehly to break even and the investors to be repaid at the rate of interest that Ares investors are receiving.
There's a number of questions here. I'm going to go into it, but just a quick answer to my question is, does that then not mean, going back to our previous question on, are the owners here to win trophies or is it just to flip players? They need to win stuff to be a club that's worth £8 billion. They need to win more leagues and Champions Leagues, no, to be worth £8 billion.
Can we go back to that diagram to see who was most profitable, most PSR compliant?
Yes.
Just go. Let's just see who's kind of like at the top of that list of clubs. I think. Yeah. So like Arsenal has not won a lot. Tottenham, oh my goodness, Tottenham's doing really well. Brighton, look at them, right? Winning is not a requirement, my friend.
Right.
This is the part that people are missing. Winning is not a requirement to be profitable, even if you're not making the Champions League.
Yeah.
These boys are here to make money. That $1.6 billion has to be repaid in 2033. As a matter of fact, it's more than that. It's 1.6 plus the 500 from Ares. So 2.1 billion compounding at double-digit interest. So none of it's being repaid. Okay, has got to be repaid in 2033. And those are institutions. These are not people that have that care about football.
Yeah.
They need to get their money because it's probably owed to somebody else somewhere else, right? At a different interest rate. It's crazy.
Right. I'm going to, before I start asking more questions, I'm going to go to the folks' questions. Sure. Unfortunately, we're pressing a little bit for time. So if you can, Bobby, we'll try and keep it we'll answer the questions and we've still got like a little bit of a scenario for Newcastle to do, but we'll answer the questions as concisely and as best as we can. And if there's any follow-up questions, I'm sure there will be, Bobby, to be honest. Like, it's so insightful what we're hearing. So anyway, let's do it. Jay, FIFA rules do say that government cannot be involved in football. Yeah, it means the England team could be banned from competing if they put a regulator in place. The England national team?
No, that's not quite right. I mean, it's a domestic league, right? So the regulator would have nothing to do with the national team. I think the National Association can't. I think he's referring to the National Association can't be owned by government.
Yeah. Okay. Aaron Cape, Chelsea might need to invest in some more hotels. We need to get that as well. Well, isn't one of your sponsors like a hotel or like the one that you had like for the last 4 games, Delta or something like that? I forgot the name of it.
It was a property development company in Dubai.
Yeah.
The weirdest thing. I did not understand the commercial purpose. That in of itself could be a separate show.
DXK, welcome to the show and God bless you. Am I right in thinking Newcastle will lose the debt of the first 2 PIF windows on July the 1st? Will lose the debt of the first 2 PIF windows.
Don't understand what that means.
If you're referring maybe to the PSR cycle, the 3-year cycle. I don't know if that's what you're. Would that be right?
All right, got it. Okay, they dragged from the losses for the first 2.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Yes, I think yes is the answer. Yeah.
No,
that's that. I think that's what they're waiting for. I think that's when the big business is going to happen, which annoys me because I feel like some of our Newcastle media seem to really forget about that and get annoyed about why we haven't bought anybody just yet. DXK, as in January 22nd, you explained actually, 92 million and summer 22. Yes. So the back end of that will go, hence why we'll have more PSR room, essentially. But also we've sold players, to be honest. So that's going to be added to. Well, I don't know what would make sense, Bobby. So Newcastle, just a quick question to you, Bobby. Newcastle sold Almiron, Lloyd Kelly. I know that Elliot Anderson and Minte went to the previous window. Would you expect the money or the whatever profit or gain from those sales to go into the 23-24 season or into the 24-25 season, which would make sense?
Sorry, when are they being sold?
So Almiron got sold in January. Lloyd Kelly got sold in January of
that's
23,
that's gonna be in the current year.
In the current year. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would make sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
That created room for you.
I'm sorry?
I know I said that would have created PSR room for you.
Yes, exactly. Chelsea have 90 million to spend. Good. Whoa.
Well, it's already spent. We paid 60 million for the 2 Portuguese kids and 30 million for Delap. It's done.
So are you not expecting any more unless there's player sales? Unless there's player sales, you're not expecting any more business from in terms of Chelsea recruiting players in.
It is just like if you have no money in Vegas, you aren't buying a round of drinks, my friend. You have no money. Okay. No money is no money.
All right. Okay.
The owners of Chelsea put 115 million pounds into the holding company in this financial year. You know what the interest on the debt is? 110 million. So they are only putting in enough money to cover the interest on the debt.
Okay. Wow. Aaron Kane, we saw reports before about PIF investing equity into Newcastle Airport. That's true. So if you might not be aware, Bobby, but Newcastle, the PIF are buying, I think, half of Newcastle Airport, the 50% stake. Perhaps this is the long game of us following that game for us following that Chelsea model and enhancing their portfolio whilst also benefiting Newcastle. I hope so. And actually, when I was in Newcastle last pre-season, I was talking to the local taxi driver, and he was saying how when owners came to Newcastle, I think they were saying that they were surprised because they wanted to get business people to come over, but there was no 5-star hotels, and so they were like, this is crazy. So they started building their own 5-star hotels in Newcastle. So there's a lot coming up for Newcastle. DXK, as in, will the PSR? But that goes back to what you were saying. Sorry, Bobby, let's go back to what you were saying, Bobby. What the kind of the mindset of Newcastle owners, which is they're buying 5-star hotels, so when they bring in, other billionaires, they can look on with pride at their assets, type of thing, and look at their team, rather than it's not to say they won't do this, but that's what the cabbie was telling me. Like they said that they had no 5-star hotels to relax in, so they're just going to buy them. Which kind of goes to your point about the mindset state of the owners, really.
This is why on a moral basis, I have no problem with a state owning a football club. And we can have a separate segment about PSR regulation, what should happen there. I don't know how much of an appetite that this audience has. I know for sure they're probably just curious though about how is Chelsea able to do the things that it does, and why can't Newcastle do the same? So.
Well, there's plenty of appetite. The engagement on the chat is incredible. The viewership is incredible. So, reminds me, guys, like, share, and subscribe, folks. And we went into the depths in this, and it's super, super intriguing. So, DXK says, as in all the PSR cycle removed the 22. Oh yeah. So yes, it'll be removed in 2023. So it's a 3-year cycle. Once the 3-year cycle is done, the last of that 3-year cycles get taken off. Yes, you're correct, DXK. David Barter, didn't realize Chelsea were in such a bad position. Damn, glad our owners are not doing the same things. DXK, so in the theory, Newcastle should have 250 million or so to spend. In theory, yes, but they would have to sell players. So our current revenue as on 23-24 is 320 million. And so if you can look at it as that's the restriction that we have, which is our revenue. Now, the projected revenue for the next year is 400 million, so that could change, but we have to continue getting to Champions Leagues and cup competitions and stuff like that. We could spend 250 million, but we would have to sell, I could only guesstimate around 100 million pound worth of player sales, which we have that to do that, but that's going to bite into our first team. I personally think, again, from my armchair accounting, like I did on Tuesday, I think it was, that we'll probably spend around 180 million and sell between 60 to 70 million pounds of players. That's just my kind of thinking on it. So yes, DXK, but if we were to do that, it will come with a heavy price, I think, for us to do that. So if it be only the January window will drop out as the buyers were in July past the June PSR window. Only the January window. No, it'll be January and the previous summer. That'll be right. But like when the cycle drops, is that year. So it's both the transfer windows. That's how I understand it. I don't know if that's right, but I think that's correct, Bobby, right?
January will drop out as the buyers were. All right. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what the timing was. She's talking about the history of which. So yeah. So it drops. So it'll be 20. This year will be
July
25.
1st will drop off.
Yeah, 22 drops out, right? So the 22 year end drops out. It's just 23, 24, 25. Look, I think, but let me just jump in a minute here, Philip, because I think this is where the accounting expertise is kind of helpful. Player sales affect your PSR position at year end. Yeah. Purchases do not. Okay. Sales affect your PSR position in the current year. Purchases do not.
Yeah, because they transfer it to the next year.
Right, because it comes through as amortization. Only 1/5 of your purchases affect you in the current year.
Yeah,
and it's the players' wages.
It's the wages.
Exactly. It's the wages, which is a bleed, right? So it's just a small amount every year. The sales hurt you only when you sell the player for less than the book value.
The value.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people always need to remember that. So when they see that PSR headroom, it doesn't mean you can go and buy more
talked about
players.
I don't know if you saw the Tuesday show, Bobby. You'd be proud of me if you hear me talking about the wages. But yeah, that's what we were talking about. David Barter, Chelsea be maxed out. Chelsea be maxed out the credit cards. Yeah, that's what we're hearing. Cy Robson, there's tons of questions, Bobby. We might not get to the Newcastle part. I'll try and get to this as quickly as possible, and we'll do what we can. Cy Robson, whatever Chelsea makes at the FIFA Club World Cup, will they be able to spend it straight away, or will that go towards the next season's kitty?
Yeah, that goes to in-season profitability, right? So we have a £200 million operating loss, as I indicated before. So the FIFA World Cup, and it's not that big, like the amount of money we can win there. The winner takes 100 million. I think you only get like $100 million, by the way, not pounds. So it's not as generous as people think, and it certainly is not going to be enough to solve the operating loss.
There you have it. Adrian Pickett, given the risks in the Chelsea structure, is Bobby concerned about it all going tits up? I think
that's a really good question. But it going tits up. Look, we've got 90 players that we can sell, so it would never become that desperate. We could always generate cash.
Yeah.
And that's a conversation that we again should be separate, because Inter Milan, for example, Inter Milan's equivalent of Todd Boehly, he defaulted on his loans, and Inter Milan is now owned by Oak Tree Capital. So they're also so when I talked about clubs being owned by private equity funds, we are the first in the UK, but in Italy, a number of those clubs have defaulted on their loans to the private equity firms. And both Milans are now, for example, controlled by private equity firms. And Inter Milan just made a Champions League final. So a default by the owners actually could be helpful, but that's a complicated discussion for another time.
Maybe it's worth revisiting at the end of the transfer window, Bobby.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and see if my theories are correct about whether or not one or two things. Chelsea is buying players if they get more debt and if they sell some players, and that might happen by the end of the transfer window. The question is, who can they sell and who did they sell? Is that player undervalued, underwater when they sell him and they make a loss? Right. So these are things to consider.
I know that Newcastle have been sniffing around Joshua Achimpong since last year, for instance, and he'll be like pure
He's pure
profit.
profit.
Yeah, exactly for you. It's like I'm surprised. Well, I'm not surprised actually. I wouldn't be surprised if he were to go.
They're going to sell Chalobah. I think they're going to sell Chalobah.
Yeah. DXK, can I ask the expert why? I think that's you, Bobby. Why he thinks PIF haven't taken advantage of the Saudi league? And we're going to get to that. It's a great question because that's literally at the end. We're going to get to it like now. Selling players for exorbitant. We're going to do that in a moment. As we've seen at other Premier League clubs, Aaron Kane. I'm going to star it, DXK, because we are going to answer that next slide. Aaron Kane, I'm hoping PIF leverage their partnership with FIFA. Interesting. I don't know if you heard, Bobby, about PIF training up with FIFA from hosting the World Cup to really put us into an elite category from a sponsorship perspective. We're going to talk about that. I agree. Okay, you guys talking amongst yourselves. Oh gosh, there's even. I'm going to go into the next slide, guys. You've been
we have to move on.
Yeah, you guys have been absolutely incredible. All right, so Newcastle, our structure, our ownership.
Yeah, those were the 2 points I made earlier, right? Which is that it's quite flat, it's quite narrow. Flat is good if you're not using debt, so you don't have interest costs. So let's say you decide to do the stadium, you decided to borrow money. The money should not be borrowed by Newcastle or its immediate parent. You should create a holding company structure where the top company raises the money to build a stadium, for example. And then narrow, meaning you don't have enough sister companies that you can sell your current assets to. So there's an opportunity for you to dispose of your women's team. So that's what I mean by putting in a holdco, midco, opco structure, meaning that you have layers above the operating company, being the football club, right? We talked about the Ohanian model earlier. So that's Serena's husband, and getting that person to come in and validate the price at which you're selling the assets to yourself, right? So Newcastle has the opportunity to replicate what Chelsea has done by adding layers vertically and then selling to sister companies, getting a third party to come in and validate the price so that the profit is baked in. And that would create you would be at the top of the chart, just like Chelsea, with a nice, compliant looking PSR income statement.
I mean, I've got kind of a twofold question around that. And it maybe points to what we talked about earlier, which is, let me just take this off quickly, because this is maybe, I haven't made up my mind on this, but I don't know if you know this. I don't know if the Newcastle owners, for instance, and this goes to obviously this. So this is around Newcastle being linked, kind of owners going out to, kind of building a stadium, possibly doing something more with it. Where Newcastle United Chiefs just visited, speaks volumes about a new 70,000 capacity stadium. This is from TBR. So PIF fund, they visited, where did they visit? They visited, where is it? They visited some place where there's a lot of other rich folks, and they were trying to see how they can essentially increase the value of the, kind of building a 65,000, 70,000 seated stadium, and kind of build not a retail park around it, but a way to kind of maximize the stadium. Apparently, there's places where they were kind of looking to I don't know whether it's like construction companies or folks who are kind of specialized in being able to maximize the most they can out of so Newcastle United Chief seeking private investment as plans for semi-centered redevelopment accelerate. In America, interesting, we talked about America, there has been a pivot towards stadium designs which put the structure itself in the middle of a much larger, often much more lucrative complex. So in Newcastle's case, land is more limited, so they will presumably. So this is a lot of opinions from the journalists, to be honest. But the overall idea is Newcastle build a 70,000 seat stadium. Can they make it more profitable with, I don't know, shops, events, and stuff like that? And you kind of do see an echo of it, like through Seller, which is like an events-based company and things of that nature. So my question is twofold, Bobby, because obviously you've kind of mentioned what Newcastle can do in terms of like being a little bit more clever, essentially in how they, handle their PSR finances. Creating a sister hold company or where they can that would own, for instance, hotels or women's stadiums and kind of do resales and stuff like that to itself, kind of thing. And it maybe goes towards what you were saying, why Newcastle haven't done it earlier. It might be that they're just seeing what other clubs and teams do before they do it themselves. My other suggestion might be that are the owners, PIF owners, just, I guess, quite straight-laced, where they either for pride, glory, for values, some of it maybe religious values, are looking to build a club. And maybe all those things intertwined, and are willing to be patient to do that. I guess we won't really find. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, if I were a Newcastle fan, I would be a little worried as to why they've not been more aggressive in the sponsorship, for example. So you see, City have been really proactive in actually just going out, doing what they want to do, doing what they think is right, and then asking for forgiveness later. And in some instances, they've won, like the sponsorship rules. That's an easy one for you guys to do. You should follow that and immediately do that. It's not clear to me why that's already not being done. All right. So the reason why it's not being done is concerning. Like, what's preventing them from doing it? Why don't they? Like, you should be having this discussion about whether or not you have PSR route. Go sign a sponsorship deal today for how much ever money you need, and get the money in. Right? I don't understand why they're not doing it. But look, I think, Philip, we've got 2 minutes left. I guess you usually have a hard stop, right? And we've not really gotten into our recommendation for what can be done. I think the low-hanging fruit is the stadium.
Yes.
And I think there's an opportunity to act on that right now, which is that I would sell the stadium in this fiscal period at a profit to a sister company to solve the PSR problems for this year. Okay, so the stadium is probably written down to zero, has no book value. Sell it to yourselves for, I don't know, 100 million, 150 million, make up a price, okay, and that should be able to be valued by an external valuer. So that solves the current year. And then what I would recommend, so it's been sold to a PIF company or another group company, if you like, that group company leases the stadium back to Newcastle at a very modest fee, so that Newcastle can collect stadium revenues over and above its rental expense, so that you've got a guaranteed profit from operations, right? And under that lease, transfer to Newcastle the naming rights for the stadium, so that you collect the stadium revenue from the sponsorship as well.
There's a few folks. I don't know if you're answering there's a few folks saying that Newcastle can't sell the stadium as they don't own it, and it's owned by the council. We rent it essentially. But are you saying?
So you already rent it?
Yeah.
Got it.
Hence why we're building a new stadium, I think.
Got it. So I think building a new stadium, and so the first part doesn't work, but the second part certainly works, which is that you build it, the PAF builds it in a separate company and leases it to Newcastle for cheap,
Yeah.
interest free. And interest is a huge component of stadium construction costs. All right. So if you get that off of Newcastle's balance sheet, you're almost like engineering it an ongoing profit. Right, guaranteed profit, right? And then you get the stadium naming as well, some exorbitant, to some Saudi company again, and you just have a built-in profit forever for as long as the stadium is functional, which is what, 40, 50 years.
Yeah. I think from what I've heard before, and I will do a hard stop, is in terms of like sponsorship deals, and I think they tie in the naming rights for the stadium as well. Why they've kind of been delaying it is that they want Newcastle in terms of sponsorship deals, and you would have seen that the whole situation around ATPs and Man City's kind of fight with the Premier League is they can't get the fear of kind of being breached by the Premier League for getting overinflated sponsorship deals, i.e. Newcastle haven't won anything in 70 years, obviously until last year. And like, who are you to start getting, 300 million, exaggerating, 300 million kind of sponsorship deals? You're not Barcelona, you're not, this type of team. So the thought is from my understanding before, is to build Newcastle up as an elite club, essentially, before kind of getting those kind of big sponsorship deals. Obviously, going to the Champions League this year might mean that we get more sponsorship deals and maybe the naming rights of the stadium, stuff like that. So I don't know if that makes sense to yourself, Bobby, but I think that's the kind of.
I think you need a boost. I think you need an
Right.
injection. I think you need a boost. I think you need to, like, organic growth. When you got City, you see that rebuild that City just did in a window and a half, right? You're not catching them. You need to. I think you need a boost. And look, this idea about waiting till you get it there to get the sponsorships and therefore not earn sponsorship money in the meanwhile makes no sense to me. It's the same kind of logic that Chelsea has right now, playing without a shirt sponsor, although we're broke because we're waiting on the champion. Like this doesn't make any sense. Okay, right? Get an interim sponsorship for a small some money at least. It's a joke. But I see Sophie B. I found the comments, by the way, Philip. I realize I just need to move off private chat. I see Sophie B is saying that who owns the land? Somebody owns the land.
I want to say the council. Someone said, is it the council that owns the land, Sophie? Someone said, is it the council? Or they own, I know the council owns the stadium. Oh, they own the land it is built on. Who owns it? The council have always owned the stadium. Who owns the land? Is it the council? Because Mike actually sold the stadium.
Oh my gosh! Like, okay, she was very.
The council. So the council owned the land.
The council owned the land. Okay,
yeah.
But look, I mean, all right. Look, the initial platforming of it is going to be difficult since you don't own the land. Your women's team, training ground, there are various assets that you probably could sell in the interim. But for me, the real opportunity is the new stadium. And this is the opportunity for the PIF to put up a stadium. Put up a stadium that brings in considerably more revenue, and then but lease it to the club for cheap. That to me is a low-hanging fruit right there.
Absolutely.
And none of the other clubs, nobody can cry about it.
I don't know if it will stop them from doing it, but I'm sure that's what we would like. Bobby, you've been absolutely phenomenal. The chat has been absolutely ringing off, and we could go.
Always enjoy being here. Always enjoy being here.
Incredible, and I can feel a part 3 coming along once the transfer windows. When the transfer window's done, chat, I'll see what I can do about hopefully getting Bobby back on. Maybe we'll have to arrange our own sponsorship deal. I don't know. to get him on. But yeah, a lot of people are saying really, really grateful for your time and your investment, Bobby, and kind of explaining things to us like super, 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 super insightful.
Appreciate the
Bobby,
feedback, guys. Thank you.
Bobby Dazzler. Someone said Bobby Dazzler.
I know, man.
Where can folks find you, Bobby?
At Bobby Fairview on X. DMs are open.
Bobby.
Feel free to respond to any of my tweets. I'm always commenting on the financial situation. And guys, I apologize. I'm not showing my face. It's because I have these controversial views on Chelsea and its financial structure, and I've been fighting that fight. So, trying to keep a little segregation from this YouTube, Twitter personality.
I don't mind. I get to create the most in creative thumbnails as a result. So
they're great.
That's their signature now. The balaclava man with the shades on, and then got Chelsea written on top. Like so.
There we go. There we go.
That is it. Chat, you've been please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You've all been absolutely incredible. And if I could plan a 3-hour show, it probably would be for Bobby, really, because of the incredible insight and content that we're getting from it. And you guys with the questions, like the level of questions that you guys have been asking and delving into has been super, super helpful. Please do give Bobby a follow. His comments on various Chelsea transfers and just football in general are super, super insightful. I enjoy reading them. So I really encourage you guys to get on it. We're about to close off, but guys, we talked all things Chelsea, all things Newcastle and PSR and understanding it and seeing where ownership structures and everything on top of that. I'm going to timestamp the video so you guys can get to the right places as well. But as always, folks, make sure you look after each other. Have a great evening and God bless, folks. Take care now.
Cheers.